Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, Simsen Talk. Guys, how are you doing? It's been a while, but we're going to go straight into it. I've got a guest in the studio.
Hi,
Guest, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Sam, mum of 3.
Yeah.
Used to work with Simone many moons ago.
We actually worked together. Oh, I started that job 2006. Did you come 2007?
2007.
And then 2008 was it that we left?
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? We don't even look old enough, Sam.
Well, we are.
It was an interesting job, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. But it was interesting. But you learn things, and it obviously set the path of where we are today.
Yeah. So just to explain, we were disabled children social inclusion officers,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And I worked with 5 to 13.
And I work with the older ones.
Yeah. So it's amazing that back then, that kind of, I guess, as you said, put us on this path, because who would have thought back then, working with disabled children and teenagers and everything, and then we have our own child.
Yeah.
So.
And you learn through certain experiences. You can put yourself in parents' shoes because you remember those conversations and the barriers that were in place. But now we're sort of we're in their shoes now.
Yeah. But I think, we were professionals that loved working with people, loved working with families.
Oh yeah.
We had empathy, because a lot of the times coming across people now, you're thinking, do you really like your job?
Yeah.
With some of the people, it shouldn't just be about the money.
No.
So I feel like we went, and it's such a shame because we lost funding on that project. Because I guess, was it a charity? Would it be classed as a charity? And they lost funding, and it was such a shame because a lot of families, that's all they had.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm really excited to interview you.
Okay.
And,
I'm nervous.
She'll be great. I must say, Sam, she's naturally hilarious. In the office, I'm surprised I wouldn't get in trouble, because you would just say a few things and I'll be in stitches. So, but I will be respectful today and let you take over. All right?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay,
thank you, Sam. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
So I am in my late 30s. I am a mum of 3. I previously before working with you, I actually started out in childcare here in the UK. Didn't like it. Ended up moving to Germany because I'm half German, and there I basically ended up working for a company, a bit like the Red Cross, where I was specifically employed to support families who had a disabled family member, and that varied from very young to adults. So I obviously worked over there supporting one particular family with a young girl in a nursery setting. I then sort of took on families in secondary schools, a bit like respite, and then with the adults I tended to do clubs, so swim clubs or social activities, just as a support worker. When I then moved back to the UK, I didn't really know what to do. Did go and do childcare for a bit, didn't like it. I think I lasted about a month before I was like, no, this really isn't for me. And then started, got the job with you. And obviously when that came to an end, I then went into schools, and I did a few stints in special schools around Barking and Dagenham and Redbridge, which I really enjoyed, but obviously money-wise, often they're quite low pay. And then I ended up finding a job in a secondary school in Dagenham. Was there for sort of 10 years, near enough.
10 years?
Yeah, really loved it, but, due to personal reasons, after, I think it was about 10 years, I stopped. And then obviously went on to have Grayson. And then obviously pandemic hit.
Yeah.
You know, nowhere was, I couldn't find work. And then obviously we moved out of Dagenham, moved more into Essex. And then we had Violet. So I have been sort of home for the last, say, sort of 5 years, I think now. Yeah, and obviously with Grayson being diagnosed with ASD.
Yeah. So we're going to get to Grayson now.
Yes,
It's Grayson. How old is he?
Grayson he's going to be 4 in February. He obviously was a COVID baby, born just before the first lockdown. So things were very different with him compared to when I was first time mum with Scarlett. So obviously, yeah, we came home. We had a few weeks at home. Boris said, no more going out, no more seeing people. That was it. Me, Scarlett, Grayson at home every day. And Cole obviously still had to go out to work because he was, you know, working for food in the food industry. Still had to work. So in the beginning, I think COVID was it heightened everyone's feelings. You know, you sort of maybe saw things that weren't always there, and you know, you had a lot more time to think about things. So obviously when Grayson was about 6 months, that's when I first started having my concerns. You know, he didn't look at me, hated being held, always, you know, used to scream his head off, you know, as a baby when you held him. He was just more, he was always content in his buggy or, you know, on a play mat or in his cot, you know, but when you held him, he used to squirm as though, you know, it hurt him, so to speak. You know, he didn't look at us. You know, for a long time I used to joke and say, you know, I don't even think he knew his name. You know, it was more sort of no, because, you know, you'd say his name and there was no reaction. But it being COVID and like I said, everything was so heightened, I just thought maybe it was just me, you know, because I had all this extra time. But then when he turned 1, obviously we had booked a cake smash session.
Okay.
We'd done it for Scarlett, so obviously was going to do it for him. Then Boris again said, no, you can't do anything. So that was cancelled. So I decided I'm going to do one at home. So it was going really well until Grayson put his hands in that cake. And it was like a completely different child. It was the first time I'd ever seen him really, really upset. And by this point he was 1. Wow. You know, he was a very happy, content little boy. He screamed the whole house down. He screamed the whole street down. The only way it could be resolved was in the bath to clean him up. Wow. And Grayson always enjoyed bath time. You know, as a baby he'd fall asleep. You know, you'd hold it and he would literally just fall. He was so in the zone. You know, water obviously was from really early on was something that was always used to calm him. So obviously we bathed him, cleaned him up, came downstairs, and that's when Cole was like, I agree with you. I see certain things and I don't think it is just, you know, us being paranoid or, you know, we'd already had issues with food because we'd obviously weaned and Grayson was a really great eater. But saying that, you know, looking back, I think he just ate because I gave it to him. You know, I used to gag with certain textures, but you know, again, when they're weaning, that's completely normal. Everyone, you know, all children go through little phases, but obviously as he was getting older, you could see that he was different. You know, he flapped a lot. We used to sort of, you know, think it was cute. You know, that he used to get so happy, or he used to make these noises. And again, I just, you know, we all thought it was cute, and you know, this was a baby thing because there's a gap between him and Scarlett. So when you think back to your first and you think, did they used to do that? Oh, I can't remember. And because I wasn't going to baby groups, I wasn't meeting up with friends, you know, you had no one else to compare to. Whereas in normal life, you know, you'd go to the playground and you'd see other children, or you'd go soft play and you'd meet up with, you know, you always got a friend that's got a baby similar age. You know, it's quite normal. But because we didn't have that, it was like, well, maybe it's just us, or maybe it's because we're at home, and you know, all these things sort of go through your head. So at that point, we was obviously in the process of selling. So when I contacted the health visitor about his 12-month check, at the time they were doing it by a form in an email that I couldn't even open the attachment, you know, despite asking them if they could just send one in the post. They kept sending me the same one on email, and I couldn't open it. So obviously where we was moving, I then said to Cole, let's wait, because when we move, we have to register with all things, and by the time things are taking, you know, it will only be a couple of months. Well, obviously it turned into 6 months because everything took so long with moving and everything else, thanks to COVID. When we moved, I obviously then registered with the new doctors and obviously the new health visiting team, and I requested that they came to see him, because obviously we hadn't seen anyone physically since Grayson was about 7 days old. So anything could have happened. And I did sort of point that out to Dagenham Health Services, because really, you know...
So Sam, sorry, going back, because of COVID, you had to complete an online form.
Yeah, so it was like, basically, you know, when you have your, you know, yearly, like certain years, isn't it, that they check?
Yeah.
Well, they obviously sent a form, and I'm presuming it was like a questionnaire. I could never open it. When we had it done face to face, we ticked things off. Well, she ticked things off.
Yeah.
I don't remember ticking things off, or I may have done, I don't know. But obviously with Barking and Dagenham, it was sent, the way they said, it would be sent through by email. Then if we had concerns, to write something on there, and then they would phone us. So it was still not done face to face. And I think in certain situations, I get it, obviously at the time it was, you know, there's all these rules and there was a lot of fear, and but there were certain aspects where I thought, no, you should still be seeing children, you know, because like I said, Grayson was seen at 7 days old, pre-lockdown. Obviously COVID was, we all knew it was happening, but no one really understood what was happening. He was seen obviously when he was 7 days old because he had jaundice, so they would come in every day to check. And then literally, that was the last time we were seen, and because of some medication I was taking while pregnant and during breastfeeding, he couldn't have his jabs when he was supposed to. But again, this got missed because people weren't, you know, you weren't seeing people like normal. So Grayson's jabs had to be delayed till he was, September, so he was about 5-6 months old when we finally went for that appointment for his first lot of jabs. So no one saw him. So he was born end of February, and he was seen by professionals for the first time in September. Now anything, really, anything could have happened. I mean, we all know that things did happen. You know, I was a second time mum. I'd had postnatal depression with my first, so I was already on their radar to be at risk second time round. No one, you know, before he was born, we'll be in touch and we'll check in and this and you know, all these telephone calls, but pandemic happened and there was nothing. Now really, it's a good thing that I wasn't in a bad place, because really, you know, I was on my own. It was a very stressful time. I mean, I couldn't even get nappies, you know, from Asda's, like having, it was a horrendous experience of having to be in a position where you're desperately trying to get baby milk and nappies and wipes, and you can't, and you know, there's nowhere to go, and it's not like you can just jump on a bus and go around to all the different shops. So obviously, yes, it was a stressful time, and I was at home with another child who couldn't understand why can't she go to school anymore, because Scarlett's also on the pathway. So every day she asked, when is COVID finished? When can I go back to school? When can I do this? When can I see Granddad? When can I go and play with my friends? And every day it was like, I don't know. I don't know, you know. When it ends, we'll all know, because we'll all be allowed outside, you know. And Dad was working, and they even relaxed driver's hours so that they could, you know, if they needed to work longer, there was that option. So so it was a very, you know, I am lucky that I didn't have a nervous breakdown, and we were sort of, you know, we went out for walks and things, but they didn't see, you know, they didn't see children. They didn't, not even at the GP. I think that my GP saw him quite early on because he had thrush. But the very first time I contacted them, you know, they were saying, like, you know, can you take pictures? And you're like, okay. Like, trying to get open, you know, and it wasn't, you know, it didn't work out. So then we did have to physically go in, and it was a very surreal time, you know. But you know, they didn't, and they were quite happy, the health visiting team. And from my understanding, there was I asked on social media, has anybody else seen health visitors? And a lot of people were saying no. We had a telephone call, you know, we had to fill in a form, and it was all done over the phone. And I think, well, you know, why couldn't they do at least Zoom calls, you know, just to physically see that child? So that delayed stuff. Obviously in the new area, they came to, you know, all suited and booted, and, you know, came in, and they were there for a sort of hour and a half, quite really thorough.
Wow.
And they agreed, you know, I said I did have concerns and I'd like someone to sort of see him. Didn't really say.
What age was he at this point?
So he was at that point 18 months old.
Okay.
So they came, and they agreed at the end of the appointment he did need to be seen by a paediatrician. That was then, it was a bit slow, so that was in the end of July, beginning of August. We didn't see the community paediatrician till, I think it was just before his second birthday. So it was either sort of, I think it was about 2 weeks before, because I was pregnant, obviously, at that point. And then from that appointment, things went quite quickly. So we were seen, it was in the February. Obviously, he was just about to turn 2. And he actually, from that point on, we did all the assessments, or wherever they asked us to go, hearing tests. He had to go be observed by a specialist nursery nurse to see how he played, speech and language, obviously the paediatrician. And then in the September, we went to an appointment. They was all there, and they were like, you know what we're going to say today? And we was like, yes, we do. And they was like, it's unanimous. There is no doubt that Grayson has autism. And I sort of thought, you know, they're going to give me information. I did.
I
thought,
do, don't we, Sam?
You know, it was a very weird appointment, because obviously a part of me knew it was coming, but a part of me was sad to be told that, because I think when as a parent you know, you hear autism, and I think there's sort of like two visions that people have. I mean, I'll be really honest, you know, years and years and years ago, when I heard the word autism, the thing that came to my head, admittedly, was Rain Man. You know. And then obviously through my job in Germany, because I got to work with a lot of young people, you know, that was my first sort of encounter, meeting young people and how wide that spectrum is, you know, because I got to work with children who never spoke a word yet could write in 4 languages, and it, you know, just baffled my mind. And, you know, other children who attended mainstream school and their needs were not as obvious. Obviously, yes, they had needs, and that, you know, they would get support, but generally speaking, you know, you just didn't know from one child to another how autism affected their life. So obviously with Grayson, for me, you know, he's non-verbal. He's not non-verbal. I think now he would be classed as pre-verbal. But obviously at the time he was non-verbal. You know, he fleets from one thing to another. Didn't care what adult was in the room. You know, they would try to do things with him, and it was like they didn't exist. He just would walk past them, you know, look for a tap with dripping water, or he'd be there out the window, or he'd be climbing over their furniture, you know. But generally speaking, it was like, you'd ask him, well, will he talk? Will he, you know, does he understand what we you know, does he understand certain things? I think for me, it was like, does he understand that we love him? You know, does he understand that I'm his mum? You know, that we're not just random people that he lives with, because his relationship between his older sister and his younger sister, completely different.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with Scarlett, because she was there when she was there first, she's always been there. In his life, she's always been there. Violet came after. And even now, I don't know if he accepts that she lives with us, but that's as far as it goes.
Okay.
Like, he looks at her, he doesn't even call her Violet, he calls her baby. You know, if you say, oh, you know, give this to Violet, there's nothing. If I say, give this to the baby, he does know that she's the baby.
Okay.
If you say, give this to Scarlett, he goes straight to Scarlett, you know. And he interacts with Scarlett, and he clearly shows, you know, affection. And because Grayson does this thing, if he likes you, you know, he touches your face. It's always touching your face. So obviously he will touch Scarlett's face. Now, when Violet was first born, he did show interest in her, but then she got ill, and we had all that problem with her breathing, and she had to have a tube put on. And when that tube went on her, you know, obviously because it's taped on the face, Grayson was different. And I don't know if it was because of that, or, you know, I'm not really sure. I mean, she was a very quiet baby, so I can't say it was because she was crying that he was, you know, overwhelmed by the noise. But he just wouldn't come near her, wouldn't, you know, if you was holding her, he'd be on the other side of the room. Okay. Whereas before that, he would try and sit on her to sit on me, just to get, you know, didn't understand that you can't do that, but, you know, that tube came in, and that was it. There was a difference. And then for a long time, it's like, you know, he looks at her, you know, he sometimes will go and sit, and if she's got something he wants, he'll go and sit next to her and try to play with that toy. Often it involves, you know, them two arguing. He'll take whatever, or she'll take something, and then we'll have tears. But there is no, it's a very different relationship. And at the time, obviously, it was already noted at that point, at the diagnosis, she was sort of like 5-6 months old. And that was a conversation we had, because it concerned me. You know, you read of other families saying that, you know, siblings, especially, you know, there are cases where people say, I've got one child who's autistic, one child who's not, and they don't, it just doesn't work. You know, I follow a gentleman on Facebook, and his 2 boys are both autistic, and the mum and dad split up and have to live separately.
Is it an American?
No, here in Essex. And mum has one and dad has the other, and they swap over throughout the week because they couldn't cope under the same roof together. And obviously, you know, they've lived like that for years. And things obviously are improving, but it's a you know, they make it work. Not every family could make that work, you know, and ultimately, you know, we're parents of 3 children, each have their needs, each have, you know, you've got to split yourself and meet all of their needs. 100%. And obviously that, it did worry. And when you sort of have conversations with professionals, their answer is, we'll just have to wait and see.
All right, Sam. So earlier you had mentioned that when you went to the panel where there was a paediatrician, you know, all these professionals, and you got the diagnosis, you mentioned something really key that I don't want to miss. You said you expected that you would get some support. So what happened from that point?
So obviously at the appointment, they go through the diagnosis, and they're all the people that have been involved in the process, they're all there. And I think we got a couple of leaflets that, I'll be honest, I don't think I even read. that day. I don't. To this day, they've got them, but I haven't read them. We had a prescription for melatonin, and basically
explain what melatonin is.
So Grayson is an awful sleeper. He'll go to bed very happily. He likes to go to bed. I think he wants to go to bed, but he doesn't sleep. So Grayson takes sort of anything, an hour, 2 hours sometimes, to fall asleep. And then he sleeps in short bursts. So he'll sleep for a couple of hours, then he's awake. Then he'll go back to sleep. And he does that continuously through the night until he's no longer going to go back to sleep. So because obviously it takes him so long to fall asleep, the paediatrician, basically we didn't even ask. They sort of said to us, would we like to try this drug? And she explained it to me. It basically should help shorten the time it takes Grayson to fall asleep. Won't keep him asleep, but it will help him fall asleep quicker. So we give Grayson, he's on a very low dose, and it's hard because it comes in a tablet form. There is a liquid form, but my understanding is they don't really like to give that out, and I'm presuming it's more to do with cost than anything. So to get the tablet into him, we hide it in certain foods. Now, it's very controversial because a lot of people say to me, you shouldn't do that for various reasons. And I understand, because we made that mistake with antibiotics that Grayson needed, and we lost 2 foods over it. So obviously some people say, you shouldn't really hide things because it's dishonest and you're taking away, choices. But ultimately, if it's the only way we can get Grayson to take it, because he won't take it. Although it's quite small, he will not take it otherwise. So we hide it in jammy Dodgers. We do. We get the mini ones, and I stick it.
You can't taste it at all.
Well, we get the mini ones because he eats them whole. Because he'll pop the whole thing in. That's good. So like literally I stick it in the middle of the jammy bit and I poke it in so that he can't see, because he looks at everything. He's like that, he's looking at everything. So obviously I hide it in there, and because he will likely put the whole thing in, then 9 times out of 10 he'll take that tablet. The other option is fruit bakes from Lidl's, but it's a bit hit and miss. We used to be able to hide them in other things, but obviously over the year we've lost foods and it is hard. And we always, I shouldn't laugh really, but we know it's working because Grayson's behaviour slightly changes. So he's gone from a kid jumping all over the living room and touching everything, and then when Grayson is overwhelmed or he's tired, so Grayson stims visually. So it will be like this. And it increases, the frequency increases, and his eyes get really wide. I always say he's like a kid on crack. Honestly, but then we know he's ready for bed. It's working, and he tends to have that. So we used to give it to him a half hour before, sort of between a half hour and an hour before it's bedtime. So he always gets that sort of around between 6 and 6:30, because he goes to bed at 7. He can't cope past 7 o'clock. And then off he goes to bed, and we went from up to 2 hours of him trashing his room and obviously making lots of noise, and never crying, but obviously it took him a long time to fall asleep, to basically sometimes it could be sort of like 20 past 7 he's gone, which is brilliant because it means he's getting that little bit longer sleeping. Now obviously by 10 o'clock Grayson is awake. Sometimes he can be still sleepy, bit confused, and he'll go back to sleep relatively quickly. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he's wide awake, and he'll play.
Will he come out of his room?
No, so Grayson has a gate on his door purely because Grayson likes water. He knows where the bathroom is. He knows how to turn the taps on. Grayson is also a climber. He's got no issue climbing on windowsills, to look outside. So because of how he is and how he behaves at home, we do have an extra tall gate. Now, if Grayson is not crying and he's not upset, I won't go into his bedroom, because I feel like if he can self-settle, and go back to sleep, that's got to be a good thing. I don't know how long that's going to last, so I'm not gonna ruin that now. So obviously, if he's awake and he's in his room, and I know he's safe, and I know he's got toys in there. He's got all his cars and certain things that light things that make him happy. And he's got his Pit Panda. Pit Panda is very essential for bedtime routine. When he clicks Pit Panda back on, we know he's going back to bed. He's going back to sleep. So as long as he's happy, we leave him. Obviously, if he's distressed, that's a different story. Grayson can't sleep in a bed with anyone else. Can't sleep in another room with anyone else. So it's not when Scarlett or Violet were upset, you just pop them in your bed and they'd go back to sleep. Grayson can't do that. He can't settle. He gets more excited. The whole house is awake. Everyone's awake. Then all the kids are awake, and it's like, it just doesn't. We've tried, and it would be so much easier if he would literally, if I could just pop him in my bed, put the cover over him, say goodnight, and he went back to sleep. But he does not. So obviously it means that, because of how he can be, someone ends up not getting a lot of sleep, and you always sort of know with how the day's been, that's going to happen, but obviously it is what it is. So Grayson obviously that's what they gave us at the appointment, and I was quite over the moon, because I later read on a lot of groups parents asking for this medicine and they're denied. I don't really understand why. I think if you've got a child that, we all understand it doesn't help them sleep longer in that sense. You don't keep them asleep, but it will help them fall asleep. And I think, like with anyone, if you're wired and you can't fall asleep, that sets the tone for the whole evening. Now, if you can fall asleep quite quickly and you get a good amount of sleep, you can see that the next day. You can see, if you wake up in the night, yes, you're still tired, you're not fully awake, you'll fall back to sleep. The next day you're happier because you've got, enough rest. If Grayson has a rubbish night, we'll have a rubbish day the next day. We do. It just doesn't, it's always, it's like with any child, and obviously as he gets older and schooling, if he's not going to get good sleep, that's going to impact with him the next day in school. And not just him, that impacts other children, that impacts staff. So when I hear like parents say, they've asked their doctors for help and they're told no, I never understand why, because the way the GP, obviously it's a shared cared agreement, so paediatricians prescribed it, but I have to get the repeats from the GP, and they've got some sort of agreement. The way that they've all explained it to me, melatonin is naturally produced in your body, something to do with the sun, but for some reason people with autism don't produce enough of it. Therefore you find it difficult to fall asleep, and this is just replacing what they haven't got. Right. There are people that are on quite high doses. I don't know if it stops working. I don't, we're like I said, we're on a low dose. It's working. The only issue is it's getting him to take it. If he, like I said, we've lost foods. If he doesn't take it, what happens then? Do we then go back to like 3 hours sleep a day? But we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. Now, obviously, with Grayson, we have been with them since, obviously, the whole process. But we've seen 3 different speech and language people because they leave. I don't know if that's an indication of things, but, and with the first lady, they didn't even tell me she'd left. It was me ringing.